chronicled the historic devaluation of black womanhood in this country. She was critical of various aspects of women's liberation struggle that she felt silenced the voices of women of color. She was also critical of various aspects of black liberation struggle that she felt silenced the voices of black women. She spoke of issues of race, class, and gender, intersectional issues over 30 years ago before it was popular, at least in certain circles, to do so. And I discovered Bell Hooks' work when I was a gender non-conforming college student in New York City. After I left IU, I went to New York City. More about that later. And I was not unlike many of you here tonight. And Bell Hooks' words were like oxygen to me. I came to critical consciousness reading her books. And there was another feminist theorist whose work really spoke to me when I was a gender non-conforming college student in New York City. And her name is Judith Butler. Have you heard of Judith Butler? Good old Judy B. And there's a moment specifically in her seminal text, Gender Trouble, that really spoke to me. There's a moment in the book when she's doing a critical analysis of Simone de Beauvoir's famous book, The Second Sex. We know Simone de Beauvoir here, yes? If you don't, look into her, major. Simone de Beauvoir famously wrote that one is not born a woman, but rather becomes one. Now, the first time I read this, I was very, very excited. Even though I wasn't quite ready to accept my own womanhood, this idea of becoming, this idea of existence preceding essence was really exciting to me at the time. And Judith Butler, her analysis of this moment, writes that nowhere in de Beauvoir's account is it guaranteed that the one who becomes a woman is necessarily female. Now, I was very, very excited the first time I read this. So one is not born a woman, but rather becomes one. But it is not guaranteed that the one who becomes a woman is necessarily female. And ain't I a woman? Before I was a gender non-conforming college student in New York City, I began becoming in Mobile, Alabama. Is there any South in the house tonight? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. As I said, I was born to a single mother, and I was born exactly 7 minutes before my identical twin brother, so that means I'm older. And I never let him forget it. Unfortunately, that means he's younger, and he never lets me forget that. And my mother often had to work 2, sometimes 3 jobs to take care of my brother and me, but she eventually became a teacher. I mean, I was like this sort of thing of like women who are working 2 or 3 jobs to take care of their kids. That is our country, right? That is America, so often. And my mother eventually became a teacher, so education was really, really important in our household. And my mother was keen to make sure my brother and I were aware of the rich history of racial oppression we were born into being born in Alabama. But she also made sure we were aware of the rich history of resistance to that racial oppression we were born into being born in Alabama. The resistance is the good. Alabama is a state where the governor, George Wallace, in the early 1960s stood in the doors of the University of Alabama to keep that school from being desegregated. But it is also the state where Rosa Parks in 1955 refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus to a white man, which was the law at the time, and that Defiant Act was a seminal moment in our nation's civil rights struggle. It was the catalyst for the Montgomery bus boycott. That happened in Alabama, and so much more. The movie Selma. Have you seen Selma yet? Selma, Alabama. Just go see Selma, and you will see that stuff went down in Alabama. A lot of stuff went down in Alabama. And before I knew anything about myself, I knew that I was black. Now, when I started interacting with other kids in preschool, I was greeted with words like sissy, words like the F word, which is a synonym for sissy that I don't like to say, but I think you know what I mean. And from preschool up until about high school, I was bullied practically every single day. I was called names by the other kids. I was taunted by them. I was often chased home by groups of kids who wanted to beat me up. And when I think about the bullying that I experienced as a kid, I think about a number of things. First of all, I think that it's curious that anti-gay slurs were used to bully me. Yet, I was being bullied because of my gender expression. I didn't act the way in which the kids thought someone assigned male at birth was supposed to act. They said I acted like a girl, whatever that means, because we know girls act all sorts of ways, right? and I think if we are serious about ending the bullying of our LGBTQ youth, we have to begin to create spaces of gender self-determination for all of our youth. Now the flawed logic of the gender binary model, the gender system that we all basically exist under, some of us resisting, that flawed logic conflates sexual orientation and gender identity. We all know that sexual orientation is who you're attracted to, and gender identity is how you identify in terms of being male, female, both, neither. It's all good. Yes. And the gender binary model basically states that if one is born with a penis, they should be masculine and attracted to women. If one is born with a vagina, they should be feminine and attracted to men. But we know that the lived experiences of our realities defy this binary model, defies this conflation of sexual orientation and gender identity. And when I think about this binary model, I think that it really cannot exist without gender policing. And often, many of us are charged to be the gender police. So many moments in my life, other kids were policing my gender, telling me how I should act or shouldn't act based on what I was assigned at birth. And I often like to think that, what would the world be like if each of us decides for a day, a week, a month, a year, that we're not going to be the gender police today, and we're just going to let people express their gender however they see fit, and authentically who they are. What a wonderful world that would be. And another thing I think about when I think about the bullying I experienced as a kid is my mother's reaction to it. Whenever my mother would find out what the other kids were saying about me and doing to me, she would often ask me, what are you doing to make them treat you that way, and why aren't you fighting back? Now, I gotta tell you, I gotta be honest, there was something in me as a kid that felt I was above duking it out on the schoolyard with other kids. I thought I was above it, I'll say it. And quite frankly, I was terrified. When groups of kids want to beat you up, when 3 or 4, 5 kids want to beat you up, it's really, really scary. And my mother's reaction was the beginnings of me internalizing a tremendous amount of shame about who I was. And when I talk about shame, I love alluding to Brene Brown's work on the subject. Do we know Brene Brown? Oh, I love her work so much. Brene Brown defines shame as the intensely painful belief that one is unlovable, that one is unworthy of love, connection, and belonging. She distinguishes between guilt and shame. She tells us that guilt is I did something wrong, and shame is I am wrong. And from a very early age, I began to feel that I was wrong. So I didn't feel fully safe at school, and I didn't feel fully safe at home, but where I did feel safe was in my imagination. I loved to dance when I was a kid, and I was pretty good at it, if I must say so myself. I was really good at the time at looking at choreography on television and imitating it perfectly. From about the age of 5 years old up until 3rd grade, I begged my mother to put me into dance classes. I dreamed of becoming a professional dancer and then transitioning into acting. And finally, when I made it to 3rd grade, my mother found a program for me called Culture in Black and White, which was an arts program for low-income kids in my hometown of Mobile, Alabama. And I was so happy because once a week I got to go and do what I love to do most. I got to get better at it and study it. And I got to tell you that I believe, because I had something that I loved to do as a kid, that I was good at, that I was truly passionate about, that saved my life. I think if we can find something that we love, that we're truly passionate about in this world, it can be life-saving. Now, but I gotta tell you, my mother, when she let me take dance classes, we had to make a little compromise. She said that you can take tap and jazz, but not ballet, because ballet is too gay, according to my mother. I don't know, something about the tights or something just kind of didn't quite work for her, but I was fine with it. I was happy because I was doing what I loved to do most. Now, 3rd grade is the time when another seminal moment in my childhood happened. And it happened one day when my 3rd grade teacher, Miss Ridgway, called my mother and said, "Your son is going to end up in New Orleans wearing a dress if we don't get him into therapy right away." Yeah, this happened. And my life. And some of you who know my story may have heard that before, but what you might not know is the inciting incident which led to the call to my mother. So we had gone to Six Flags on a church trip a few weeks before this. More about the church later. We had gone to Six Flags on a church trip, and I had a very little bit of spending money, not a lot. But I remember going into a very crowded gift shop at Six Flags, and the second I walked in, I saw this handheld fan just hanging there. And the second I saw it, I knew I had to have it. It had peacocks on it. It was fabulous. And what you should know about this is that I had seen Gone with the Wind a few weeks before that. And for those of you who don't know, the heroine, the main character of Gone with the Wind, Scarlett O'Hara, famously fans herself with a handheld fan. So I'm sitting in 3rd grade, just fanning myself. Fanning away, feeling very Scarlett O'Hara, feeling very Gone with the Wind, fabulous. And then Miss Ridgway looks at me and she says, "Come here and bring that thing with you." And then she marches me down the hall to Miss Fairley's classroom, the 5th grade teacher, and she says to me, "Show her what you were doing with that thing." And I'm like, "Yeah." And I started fanning myself. Anyway, she's like, "Okay, stop. Now go back to class." And then my mother got the call. So I'm sitting in the therapist office, like, oh my life. So I'm sitting in the therapist office, and I remember the therapist asked me if I knew the difference between a boy and a girl. And in my infinite wisdom as a 3rd grader, because 3rd graders are so wise, right? I said, there is no difference. Now, years before Judith Butler and any kind of gender theory, anything in my mind, but in the way that I rationalized it at the time as a 3rd grader, is that everyone was telling me that I was a boy, but I knew that I was a girl. I knew in my soul, in my spirit, that I was really a girl, so I reasoned that there must not be any difference. And now, as a kid, I watched a lot of television, so I heard about this thing on TV called doctor-patient privilege. So I assumed that everything I said to the therapist was between me and the therapist. But apparently 3rd graders do not have doctor-patient privilege. So everything I said to the therapist, my mother found out about, and she yelled at me. And whenever my mother would yell, the entire house would sort of shake. It was really deep. And she yelled at me and she said, "A girl is this and a boy is this, and you're a boy, you can't act this way." And what you have to understand is that, Mobile is, one of the biggest cities in Alabama, but it's still a small town. And people were talking about her. She couldn't have people talking about her. Do we know what that's like in small towns? And, at the end of the day, so this is another moment where not only were the other kids policing my gender, but my teacher, a therapist, and my mother were also policing my gender. And at the end of the day, like, what's so wrong with a little kid wanting to fan herself like Scarlett O'Hara? I mean, like, what's the big deal? Looking back, it's kind of cute, right? It's cute and adorable. But this was late, you think like World War II or something was about to start. This was something that had to be dealt with. We were members of Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church. Does anyone know the AME Church here? You folks, cool. The AME Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, for those of you who don't know, is the oldest all-black denomination in this country. It was started around 1794 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, by a guy named Richard Allen and some of his colleagues. They were frustrated with the ways in which black parishioners were being treated in the Methodist Church, and so they started their own church. If you ever go to Philly for a tour, the very first first AME Church, we call her Mother Bethel, still stands in Philadelphia. If you do a tour, you can check out Mother Bethel. I got to do that a little over a year ago. But we were members of Bethel AME Church in Mobile, Alabama, and going to church every single Sunday was pretty much mandatory. And there were a lot of wonderful things about the church for me, a lot of wonderful things. The spirituality that I carry with me to this day, I learned in the AME Church that I grew up in. Even though I don't subscribe to organized religion now as an adult, I consider myself a very spiritual person, and that the foundation of that started in the AME Church that I grew up in. And church was wonderful for me too, because it presented yet another performance opportunity. I loved to perform as a kid, and like church was great for that. I was an usher, and I sang in the choir, and I seemed to be one of those kids always getting up and making speeches, like whenever I could. So now that just changed